All right, we're recording. So thank you all again for joining us on the 47th edition of the Service Fabric Community Q&A call. Also with even more structure now. We have from the team Anthony and David, and I believe maybe others, let me know, Anthony, who will be presenting on today's topics. A reminder that this particular call is not under NDA. It will be recorded, or it is being recorded, and it will be shared later on. I'll be helping to monitor the chat thread. For those of you who do have questions, go ahead and throw them in the chat. And besides that, Anthony and David, go ahead and take it away.
Yep. Thanks, Cesar. So welcome to the 47th edition. As Cesar said, I'm Nandini, the PM in Service Fabric, and I have a couple of my colleagues here, like Peter and Mike from the PM team, and then we have a presenter from the first party, like internal Microsoft customer who's using Service Fabric as well later in the um, so as Cesar said, starting this Q&A call, we want to add a structure, like a framework, so we can better use the community, get feedback on things that we are doing, and also open up opportunities for customers who are in this call, who actively participate in this community session, to come and share their solutions that they built on top of Service Fabric, or solutions that integrate with Service Fabric, which we as a product team have not solved yet, and would benefit the community. Like open source, it can be open source, it can be any other solution that you have built that could benefit the rest of the community as well. We welcome you to share your product or solutions that you have built. I do believe that Cesar had filled in submitted a survey in when the previous. It's still there in the blog post. I think it's in the 46th or 45th edition. We had asked for the customers to fill in the survey um, to let us know what topics they would be interested in and what ideas they would like to share with us. So I can remind and the folks here and share the link again. So please free to fill it. Um, so we did take time to look at the responses, and I looked through the responses, and we are trying to formalize a plan for the rest of the year. So based on the feedback we've heard from the survey, I'm trying to organize topics for every session, bring in people from the engineering team, and also for other customers who have done things that would benefit, that can be shared openly. Today, like I think I'm going to start with the monthly release that went out. This Just to give a reminder, every month we do CU releases, monthly releases to address hot fixes and bugs. That is a release cadence for these minor releases, and then every 3 to 4 months we do major releases. So we did 7.1 in April, and 7.2 is coming end of September. Um, we thought we'll take a few minutes to get you guys excited about like some of the cool upcoming features. There's a huge list. We are just going to share like the ones with which it's internally been approved and vetted. Uh, but before I start talking about 7.2, maybe I'll give a minute to Peter to share some updates on the CU3, which was released last week or early this week.
Sure. Thanks, Anthony. So we began rolling out 7.1 CU3 about 2 weeks ago now. So if you haven't received the update yet, I would expect you will receive it within the next 5 days at the latest. And some of the bigger announcements that we made along with 7.1 CU3 are we're extending the runtime support from for 7.0 until October 1st, 2020. So that was going to go out of support at the beginning of August, and we have now extended it until the beginning of October. So if you see any warning messages or receive any emails asking you to upgrade to 7.1 right now, you can disregard that and wait until October 1st if that's what you want to do at this point in time. The other announcement we made is as of Service Fabric 7.2, we will be removing support for .NET Core 2.2 runtime as it's reached its end of life. So we recommend that you upgrade all of your applications to the LTS version of .NET Core 3.1. And this is the exact same thing we're doing with the SDK. So we're going to drop support for .NET Core 2.1 when 7.2 comes out. So we recommend that anyone with a dependency on the .NET Core runtime upgrades to .NET Core 3.1. I'll send it back to Nandini to talk about 7.2 now.
Thanks, Peter. So just to wrap up what Peter said, the CU releases, every release that we do when the rollout starts, it takes like 7 to 10 days to complete the rollout in all the regions. So the current rollout, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Peter, like I think it's going to finish by end of this month. And the current plan to roll out 7.2, we're hoping is end of September, which means like by mid-October, you'll have it available in the regions. So I can't give you an exact date, but that's a current plan. I think we are trying our best to update our roadmap or the dates for the releases in GitHub. And before I start talking about 7.2, we are, I know this comes up in every community call, so I want to let you know that we are listening to you. GitHub issues, we have started like investing time to go through the backlog and then triage it and clean up and create a structure and a discipline to ensure that we are actively getting back to you and responding. So we have a lot of backlog, so be patient with us and we will do our best to address it, triage it like by end of this year. And we've also, in the contributing in a Service Fabric repo, the contributing document has been updated to emphasize that please do not create production related issues in GitHub. There's a guideline on what to do. And then for non-production issues, also we have defined some new guideline to create issues and like some tagging guidelines and whatnot, so that it's easy for us when we're internally looking at triaging things. So coming back to 7.2, which is slated for end of September, which is the next major release. There's a huge list of features coming out. I'm just and internally we are reviewing and making sure that meets the standards for the respective GA state or the preview state. So some of them I just want to call out was like we had said like we are supporting VMS's ephemeral OS disk for Service Fabric stateless or stateful applications. That is going into GA state around 7.2. And then we are going to add support for a node type which is like stateless. So that can be used for stateless services, and it helps with your application lifecycle scenarios. And also another thing is this is one thing that we offer support, cross-AC support, but it requires to have 3 different VMSs spanned across 3 different ACs. So the new feature that we are working on, which will reach public preview state in 7.2, is to have single VMSs spanning across ACs, multiple ACs. And then there's another one is like currently you can have only one instance per service in a given node. We are exploring a feature to have multiple stateless service instances in the same node. And on the resource governance on the PLE front, we are trying to come up with new features to improve the predictions better, to improve your availability or COGS. So there's a new API that is coming to report metrics on behalf of your replicas. On the security side, we want to, if you're using common name based certs, we are supporting an experience scenarios where you can automate the rotation of your certs for cluster certs, which is coming in 7.2, which is already there. And then also for application certs to rotate, if you're using, this is only, again, I'm emphasizing, if you're using common name based certs, this auto rotation feature will be enabled for both cluster certs and application certs. The application certs feature is, I believe it's already out there in the CU3 or one of the CU2s. And another one is like, if you're using manage identity for your SF applications and the manage identity token service, in order to get access to the resource and get the token, there is a client authentication process in place, but that was not very hard. It was more not hardened. So we are trying to make it more secure, the implementation behind it, to make sure that the secret that is used is there's integrity and authenticity in place to ensure that the tokens, the secret that you use to get the tokens is more secure. And on the monitoring or the observability space, we did announce that Fabric Observer is already out there as part of the 7.1, but we are adding more features to it to make it more robust and make it work for both Windows and Ubuntu. So there is a preview release, Fabric Observer 3.0, that was just announced, I believe, last week or just recently, and it was completely Fabric Observer and Cluster Observer are now a .NET Core 3.1 application. Which what that means is it works both in Windows and Ubuntu, and we are. It's an open source. It's always been an open source. So we asked the customers here and the team here to install. It's a stateless service. It's like a watchdog service that you can install, and it'll collect health information about all the nodes in your cluster. So we ask the folks here to explore it, give us feedback, create issues if you see anything, or if you have any better feedback, please explore it. And then there is another Fabric Healer is another stateless service that we're working, which works with the observer to proactively alert you or mitigates for most commonly found issues in the Service Fabric cluster or the nodes. So it works with the observer. It's like observer is like collecting data about your health events, and healer is something that will help you mitigate the most common problems that you see, or the most common problems identified by the observer. And the last one is the Service Fabric Explorer. I think we already, if you go look at 7.1 blog post, we already say that the Service Fabric beta, what it's going to offer, all the enhancements it's going to offer in terms of popping up the repaired jobs, talking more about the repaired job status and the replicator status. So some of them that I've already highlighted here is already called out in the 7.1 blog post. So every major release, we ensure that we give you guys a heads up on what's coming in the next major release. And some of the information that I've shared here was already described in detail, or there is information out there. So I encourage you to go read the 7.1 blog post, and also go look at the CU3 blog post to educate yourself on all the things that Peter had said about the upcoming, the breaking change, especially if you are using .NET Core 2.1. So please go read it. So now I think I'm done with 7.2 highlights. There is more coming. This is not the complete list. We could not, until internally we do the review process and the engineering team approves it, we cannot share a lot of information right now. Please stay tuned. And I think I'm done with my thing. So if you have any questions on what Peter and I shared, like we'll be here to answer or clarify those. If you can hold on to the questions toward the end, we really appreciate it. So I just want to appreciate David's time and introduce David here. He's from the Dynamics team, and he's a customer of Service Fabric, an Intel customer of Service Fabric, and he's built a solution, open source solution called YARP, to solve some traffic ingress problems with, sorry, I'm mumbling, Mom, with Service Fabric. And I think he believes it's already open sourced, or he's planning to open source it. So I will hand off to David, and he is planned to talk about YARP and also do a short demo for you guys. Yeah. Handing off to David. Thanks for waiting, David.
Of course.
It's all yours.
Good morning, everyone. Are you able to see my slides?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. So we'll get started, and I will do my best not to bore you too much with slides. This will be short. It's really just to give you an overview of what we're talking about and why it is relevant. So the topic of this discussion is traffic ingress. which is probably something that anyone building applications on Service Fabric might have dealt with at some point. And Service Fabric comes out of the box with a solution for this problem with a Service Fabric reverse proxy that you can easily enable inside of a cluster. But you get very little flexibility with that component. It works great for some scenarios. If you want to do service to service, it can make your life a lot easier in selecting the final endpoint of a replicated distributed service within a cluster. But for more complicated scenarios, if you want to have a front-facing endpoint that you want to serve all of your applications in your company behind, it gets a little bit trickier. And that's where this presentation comes in. So this came out of a requirement that we've had in my team. So a little bit of an introduction about me. My name is David Nisimov. I work on the CAP Core Services team. So that's the Citizen Application Platform group at Microsoft. We run the Dynamics, the Power Apps, brands, a lot of these applications. And a large portion of the services that are backing those are hosted in the infrastructure that my team manages. And the challenge we encountered, I'm going to walk you through a few pictures to illustrate, is we have a Service Fabric cluster. By the way, we're all in on Service Fabric, and we run on Windows clusters. We have public endpoints that we want to host. So for example, this is not a true representation of reality, but it's a good example to illustrate. Imagine we have this Service Fabric cluster with a set of VMs, and we want to expose multiple domain names under that physical infrastructure, right? So we want to say host powerapps.com and dynamics.com. The way we're going to achieve that is we run multiple services, each responsible for a different piece of the product. And then we want somehow to make sure that requests meant to powerapps.com land on the right place. That should be pretty straightforward. Using Azure technology, right? We can have an Azure load balancer in the picture that receives incoming requests from the outside, layer 4, routes them to any machines that are reporting to be healthy, and life is good, except not quite. Because Azure Load Balancer doesn't have the smarts to understand any of the application layer concerns. So for those who might be familiar with TLS and how a secure HTTPS handshake works, you have that SNI field that indicates to the server which target server is desired for a request. Load Balancer is unaware of that. So it cannot make a smart decision whether to route a request to one VM that is actually hosting the right endpoint or another. And that's the problem. So how do we solve that? If we just had that, we have an unhappy cluster. How do we solve that? Is we add another layer in front of everything that will be serving as a reverse proxy. And as I mentioned, the Service Fabric reverse proxy can itself be used for this purpose. It comes with a few limitations that I'll explain as we go. But this is basically the idea. So now we have a reverse proxy layer. It can figure out, based on anything, any piece it can extract from the incoming request, it can figure out where to take these requests. Life is good, and we have a happy cluster. So that's a rough overview of where we are. So are we talking about yet another proxy? Of course, we've heard about proxies in the past. This is nothing novel per se. So some of the things that we are striving for and why we think this is relevant, and hopefully it will resonate with your scenarios as well, is, of course, the primary concerns of any high-scale product: scalability, security, reliability, observability. It is worth a call out to Envoy. It's it's a very interesting product in this space. Unfortunately, it doesn't support Windows very well at this point, though I hear there has been some work happening in that area. But in any case, observability is key. The idea that you have this proxy layer in front of your services, it can give you tremendous amounts of valuable information about how your services are performing with a better understanding. It's a better picture of what your actual customers might be experiencing of your services. So going through the list, some of the things that are super critical for us is protocol support. Of course, HTTP, HTTPS, latest and greatest, TLS 1.2, TLS 1.3. We have internal teams that have requirements for long-running connections using either WebSockets or even gRPC. So we want to support those. We want to run on Windows. We want easy onboarding. And I'm going to explain a bit what I mean about that. That is not referring to onboarding of the proxy itself, to the deployment of this reverse proxy component, although it turns out to also be easy. But what we care about in my team, for example, is we have a lot of other partner teams coming to our infrastructure We want their lives to be easier. That's the reason we exist, right? So we want for someone to come in and is running in a cluster to expose their endpoints. We want that to be an easy experience. And I'll show you exactly what I mean by that. And in terms of extensibility, being something that we can fully manage in code that we understand and have the full capability to extend and modify, that is a huge bonus. So being in the .NET ecosystem written in C#, that's kind of nice. So the naming, right? What I'm talking to you about is this thing that is coming out called YARP, yet another reverse proxy, or YARP, another reverse proxy, this recurrent definition. And you can think of it however way you like it. It's just the name. You can think of a friendly pirate, YARP, and let's get to the interesting stuff. So this is a little game we're going to play together. Unfortunately, I can't see any of you right now, so I'll just have to assume that you're playing it with me. This is a picture that illustrates a lot of the concerns that I was talking about. So we have requests coming in from clients on one side. They would go through some piece of technology to receive those requests, figure out where to take them. So say I now know this request is meant for backend 1, powerapps.com, or maybe I know it's for dynamics.com. So I take this fork. Then I need to pick one server out of the ones that are available and then send the request. So if we're going to draw a box here, where's the proxy? Well, there's the proxy. So the component we're talking about is this blue box on the left. It receives requests, forwards them to the right endpoints. And the reason it is interesting is it knows how to find those endpoints on its own. So nobody needs to manually type these things. In terms of terminology, you can think of these three high-level abstractions. There's the notion of routes, which defines how to take an incoming request and where to map it to. There is this notion of services. So a service is a group of destinations, endpoints, that perform the same function. So I can pick equally among these endpoints and route requests. And the destinations themselves are those endpoints. So think Service Fabric replicas or instances. Just a word of caution. In YARP terminology, what I'm calling services here, which we know as services in Service Fabric, they call clusters. So keep that in mind when you see the word clusters in YARP. That does not mean a Service Fabric cluster. It means a cluster of endpoints. So these three endpoints are bundled together as one logical entity, that is that service. It is a cluster of endpoints. So the name chosen is clusters. Okay, so that's that. In terms of how it works inside the box, we basically are built on top of the latest and greatest web stacks from Microsoft. So this ended up being a very fun relationship with the ASP.NET Core team. So the product that I'm going to show you very soon is built entirely on top of ASP.NET Core 3 and ASP.NET Core 5 as it's being developed, and runs on Kestrel. So our web front server, the recommendation is to go with Kestrel because that gives us a lot of freedom in how we do a lot of things. Like if you want to do SNI server selection, you can easily do that with Kestrel. We do that. So this is ASP.NET Core, this box on the left. What do we build on top is we keep track of the runtime state of our reverse proxy with those three abstractions I talked about, clusters, destinations, and routes. These are updated from Service Fabric. So we have a Service Fabric layer that talks and injects this new configuration when it changes into YARP. And then YARP is responsible for applying all the runtime state. The beauty of that, as you will see, is that there is no Service Fabric integration path, not on the hot path. So requests are coming in and out. They're being processed entirely within YARP. This is just a tiny thin layer on top that helps configure the proxy when necessary. So the hot path is really managed by YARP internally. And let me stop here the presentation and let's make it a bit more fun. So with a real demo, here's what I'm going to show you. I have a Service Fabric application, interestingly called Weather App and Weather Service. So this is one application with a single service, Weather Service. Weather Service exposes an endpoint, my weather forecast endpoint. And if I run that, and in fact I have, so I can go to my Service Fabric Explorer. This is my local cluster. I have my Weather App running. It has a Weather Service running with 3 replicas. I can pick any one of them Let's find their endpoint, like this one. So you will see each one has a different port number assigned. 30,002, 31,003, 34,002. So 3 different endpoints. I have conveniently already bookmarked them. So we have those 3 endpoints here. If I hit any one of them, so let's open that in a new window. That's a result I get from one of my weather services. So that nothing fancy here. I'm just running a REST service on Service Fabric in my local cluster. You will also notice if I open my dev tools here and go to the network tab, explore one request, you will see I'm adding a response header that indicates where this request came from. So this one went to 30,002, and we see the response header tells me X weather destination 30,002. So this is just a way to track where my requests are going. If I issue one to another one of the replicas, and there we go, 34,002, 34,002. Life is good. So where is the proxy? So let's add a proxy into the picture. And the way we're going to do that is we're just going to run it. So this is coming straight out of the YARP repo that I mentioned. In fact, there is a PR out as of last night with exactly the bits that I'm about to demo. This is that PR, Service Fabric Integration, Dynamic Discovery for Microsoft/Reverse Proxy. This is our friend YARP. And here's how it works. So it ships with a reverse proxy.servicefabric.sample, which is a sample project that integrates with Service Fabric. Notice this itself is not a Service Fabric service. This is just a executable. So it builds to an exe that I can run. But because it is running on my cluster, it will be able to talk to the local Service Fabric cluster. So that's how some of the magic is going to happen. Let me quickly run that, and let's see what happens. So we have this window over here. And this should seem familiar if you've run ASP.NET Core projects before. A lot of these logs color-coded. The pieces that are new here is you will see every few seconds an entry like this, Microsoft.reverseproxy.servicefabric.discoverer. It just discovered one backend and one route. That's interesting. Let's go back to the Service Fabric Explorer to try and understand what might be going on. So this is SFX. I have my weather application and I have my weather service. One of the things that we conveniently add as part of running that proxy is if I go into the details tab now, and you know that Service Fabric has this nice health model, you will notice there is this entry here. Let me stop refreshing so I can select things. This is a health report that YARP has issued on this service. So what just happened is that as I started YARP, it found this service. This is just now. It found this service. It added the configuration from the service. I'll show you how that works. And it has updated Service Fabric so that it's very easy to see if there's any problem with my configuration. If my service was not following the right contracts to onboard to YARP, I would see a warning here, and I might very easily find what might be going on. So this is all looking great so far. We have YARP running. It has found my service. I can see that here. Now, if I go back to where I started, I can issue a few requests. So let's make this interesting. YARP itself, this window is running on port 5001. So if I run that here, there we go. Now, interesting. Okay, so I get a response that looks similar to what I was getting from each replica, right? So if I go to each replica, I'm just refreshing. We get a random response each time. If I go through YARP, it seems to be working, but how do I know it's actually working? Well, let's look at the headers. So let's run a few of these requests. I'm hitting refresh a few times. Okay, now let's go through a few of them. So the first thing you're going to see is that each of them has a new response header, X YARP-SF. This is just something I added to make it easy to find requests going through the sample. So if we go to startup, we are adding that here. So X-YARP-SF is a header we add when we go through YARP. So this request went through YARP. Great. It also has the headers coming from the destination. So I can see for each request where it actually ended up landing. This one went to 30,002. That one went to 31,003. Notice how the actual request is the same, right? And YARP is taking care of some load balancing for us and picking the right destination to send a request to. So I'm going to stop the demo here. There's a lot more that we could explore. YARP fully supports WebSockets as well as any upgradable HTTP1 connection. It also supports HTTP2 as a transparent proxy, so it doesn't need to understand any protocol built on HTTP2. It will just proxy it happily and blindly, which means it works great with gRPC. It will also work great with any other protocol built on top of HTTP2. And as soon as Kestrel supports HTTP3, we would just get that for free. So that's some of the benefits there. The one thing I did not show you, let me open SFX again. And this is just a quick thing that is important for you to know, which was the discovery portion. How did YARP find that this service wanted to be hosted behind YARP? And the way we're doing that is with the service manifest itself. So if I go to my service, I can see its manifest. You will see there is a few things here that are not common in service manifests. We have these extensions, which are just arbitrary key value pairs. So we have an extension for YARP, and we can configure a bunch of parameters for it. And this is what YARP, the service fabric integration for YARP, is looking for. So the label yarp.enable with value true in an extension called YARP instructs YARP that this service wants to use YARP. And we can configure it in all sorts of ways. We could add labels here to say I want to append a response header to my requests, or I want to only serve a given path prefix. In this case, we're doing everything. Star / catch-all. This is the ASP.NET Core placeholder for anything. So that's why weather forecast was matching this endpoint. It's all dynamic. If I deploy a new version of the service, YARP would pick it up within a few seconds. Life is good. And so I'll stop here, the demo. I don't know how much time I have, so I'll start to wrap things up and just walk you through some of the high level of where this fits in the ecosystem. So the onboarding story, this is what I just showed you in a real demo. This is all it takes for if you're running YARP as your reverse proxy solution in your cluster, and you want to expose a new service on any host name or on any path you might want to expose that in. This is pretty much all you would have to add to the service manifest, deploy the service, and you're done. Some benchmarks just to illustrate this is not scientific, so don't look too deeply into these. But just to show that YARP being built on top of ASP.NET Core and Kestrel, those folks care a lot about perf, and this will only get better. So it's really nice that they're able to push this forward. In terms of open sourcing, as I mentioned, this started as it was a requirement we had in my team, so we started building that. We realized soon thereafter that a lot of other teams at Microsoft had the same requirements and were tackling the same challenges. So we were able to partner with the ASP.NET Core team and some of the same folks from the .NET Core team, and they were able to take our code. So if you look at the YARP commit history, you will see a commit like this one, import Island Gateway code. Island Gateway is the code name of our reverse proxy solution that we were working on before YARP was made public. And that's how it all started. This is the PR that is out there. So for this audience, you're all Service Fabric folks. You can take a look at that and start playing with these early bits. It is all out in the open. You can help out. These are some links that you can follow. I can share them as well on chat after. But yeah, feel free to give it a try. Feel free to let us know what worked, what didn't work, and we'll improve this as we go. Thanks a lot, folks. That's the end of my presentation.
All right, awesome. So thank you both for the structured part of the presentation. Looks awesome. What we have left now, looks like we have about 20 minutes left to go ahead and answer some of your questions. It looks like some of this is already being discussed in the chat window. So Anthony, if you'd like, any other questions that you haven't addressed already, we can go ahead and read those aloud and then give the answers for the recording.
Yeah, before I start talking about the questions in the chat, like, thank you, David, for taking the time and coming and sharing your. So, do you have any questions for David? Or like David, like, is this completely? I think maybe I'll start with a question. Like, is it open source? Is it completely like production ready? What is the current state of YARP?
Yeah, so To the first part, yes, it is completely open source. It is all out there. If you share the links that I had in my presentation, I'll put those on chat as well. You can start playing with the bits. They are all licensed with a very permissive license, so that shouldn't be a concern. It's much like the rest of ASP.NET Core itself. Mm-hmm. In terms of production quality, I have a two-part answer. The first one is a clear no. No, this is not production quality yet. It doesn't have the GA stamp from Microsoft at this point. Having said that, internally, we have a private branch of something very similar to this that we are running in production and that we consider GA quality. So it hasn't gone through all the scrutiny that it has to before we can publicly call it GA. But we're getting there. The target for YARP, as I understand it, is it would reach the 1.0 milestone with the .NET 5 announcement, wherever that is. I think that's meant to happen towards the end of the year. And that's, I think, the soonest you can expect any of this to be considered production quality.
Thank you. Any other questions for David? Yeah, if you can share the open source repo. I believe somebody asked in the chat. If it's already answered, that's great. If not, and
yeah, I had a quick question about whether or not it's sort of like it's almost replacing the naming service at some layers. If you were to use this, is it because the naming service also is that a true statement? I'm not saying the naming service goes away by any means, but also does it do a better job of load balancing? Because my understanding is the naming service is just random. Is that one of the reasons you would use it?
So not quite. In fact, the discovery portion of the Service Fabric integration, it is actually built on naming service. So naming service is always the source of truth for all endpoint and service and anything that is on the cluster. The source of truth of that in Service Fabric is naming service. That doesn't change. We just built a layer on top that queries naming service and applies additional logic on top, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, you're gonna get, because what I'm looking at is that right now, I don't send my traffic to individual ports or instances of that service, right? I'm gonna let the naming service determine where that traffic goes. But YARP actually takes that. It seems like it takes that out of you're sending to individual ports, right? So YARP takes over some of the responsibility of the naming service.
Well, I think that there might be a slight
or a gateway, maybe gateway is a better word.
Yeah, I think we're saying exactly the same thing, just in slightly different words. Technically, in a scenario where you're talking from one service to another, the only place where you involve naming service is to figure out the destination endpoint. That's all you would query from naming service. Applying any load balancing policy or anything on top, that would be an application concern, much like DNS, right? DNS will resolve a name to an IP address, and then you can call it. Service Fabric naming service is doing kind of the same thing at a different layer. And YARP just builds on that to figure out the routing table and where it should be sending requests. You might be thinking as well about a mesh routing scenario, right? If you want service A to talk to service B within the same cluster, normally you might have to find that endpoint and then call it. Is that what you might be thinking?
I'm actually doing as a gate. We have a gateway service that we've written that uses the naming service to figure out the current ports of the instances of the application. So this seems similar to that.
Very much so. Yes. If you look at that PR, I'll share the link. You will see that we have our own piece of code that does the same. So it will be very familiar to you, I think.
So what about authentication? Because that's the other main thing that our gateway does, is it does some authentications of requests. Is there any sort of authentication in Europe?
There is. So if I don't know if it's worth sharing again, but I suppose I can very quickly. Do we have time, Atinati? I don't want to take up too much. If you had other questions.
I can go dig into it. I was just wondering, do you guys offer like certain authentication providers? We don't have to get too detailed.
Yeah, so just I don't know if you've played with ASP.NET Core programs. Is that what you currently build on, or no?
Yes, that's what our current gateway is built on.
Okay, so the YARP example that I showed, this YARP sample, is just an ASP.NET Core application. It has the familiar program.cs, startup.cs. The only thing that is different here than a normal non-YARP project is these lines. So YARP just builds on top of a normal ASP.NET Core service, and it just injects itself into the pipeline as a set of dynamic endpoints. So just like controllers are mapped this way in ASP.NET Core 3 and onwards, right? We are able to add YARP just like that. So this is really all there is to it. You can do everything else that you normally do in the rest of your ASP.NET Core application. In fact, this example does include use authorization. If you wanted to have custom policies here, you can configure them through YARP and they would be honored.
Okay, yeah, I know I could inject YARP into my existing gateway, which to perform some more intelligent-based load balancing. What I was wondering is, does YARP get into the spectrum of authentication, or its single responsibility is pretty much the reverse proxy and the load balancing? If you want to do authentication, you would still need to perform that, like you're showing inside of a consuming application.
That's right. At this point, think of YARP as a SDK that you can inject into your ASP.NET Core applications to add proxying functionality. So instead of you having to deal with buffers and doing high performance copies of things from one place to another, load balancing, all of these things, you just add YARP as a helper library that takes those concerns away from you.
Cool.
Everything
Cool.
else you can still achieve the normal ways.
Greg, David, I linked the auth docs for YARP in the chat.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I
Awesome.
think if you still have questions for David, feel free to. David, yeah, you can use the time if you have to re-emphasize some of the things. That's fine. We are on your behalf. We are looking at the chat window to see if there's any follow-up questions on YARP. I think one of them, I guess you guys already discussed it. So there is one question from Wit. Apparently, I think Chris already addressed it. I just want to, does this handle SSL offloading? That is, can I terminate HTTPS at YARP or use HTTP internally?
Chris already responded on that.
Yeah, already responded, so it should be fine. And there is another question from Gabriel. So Gabriel, do you mind repeating the question here? Can we have one service with YARP plus island gateway for all cluster and services?
Yes. What we'd like to do is having one service with YARP and the island gateway for the all cluster. Can we do that? We are looking forward to replace the traffic today.
Yeah, that is precisely what we run internally. So we have in our clusters, in literally every one of the clusters that my team manages, the first thing we deploy to them is Island Gateway. Well, this is the internal name of what we call our application. That includes YARP. So you can very easily do that, and then any services you have in your cluster that wants to be exposed outside or inside, you can just add those annotations to the service manifest, and you're pretty much done.
And when do you think the PR will be closed on the YARP project?
You've been muted, David.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. It will probably take a little while for it to ship and get to master. There are some high-level discussions we need to go through. We want to make sure that when we ship it, we will be confident with all the aspects of it. Having said that, if you want to try it out and build POCs, you would be more than welcome to. We would appreciate the feedback.
Makes sense. David, can I get in touch directly with you about another questions?
Sure thing. I don't know if you caught my email. Feel free to chat. Definitely.
Thank you, David.
Thanks, David. So Peter and Mike, help me out if I missed any questions on David's topic, YARP.
There was one here about whether we are planning to ship it as a Service Fabric application that people could just deploy. It's something that we've definitely thought about. we don't have concrete plans for that at the moment, but I think it would be nice to track that maybe as an issue on the GitHub if you want to add that, and we can gauge how much other people are wanting that as well. It would help us prioritize.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, David. Yeah. So WIT, are you asking a question to David? Like, does it support any automatic certificate management? Is
Chris got that one too.
Oh, Chris got that one too. Okay, got it. Okay.
I guess I've got one more then, if I can jump in though.
Yeah.
So say I install this to a stateless service. The problem that you showed was that you've got the request coming in for some domain. It hits the Azure load balancer, and who knows how it goes anywhere in the cluster. How do you solve that? How do I ensure that the request hits the load balancer and then lands on a VM hosting this? Do I have to have that stateless service running on every instance of the entire VM? And then we just trust that it's going to route accordingly from there?
Yeah, the way you solve that is through Azure Load Balancer health probes. So each instance of the gateway, of the reverse proxy, of whatever is that front-end component, and this is the same for any user-facing endpoint you want to serve behind load balancer, you would generally have an endpoint that load balancer can query every few seconds. And load balancer keeps track of what are the healthy endpoints. It will only route traffic to those. Just always remember that load balancer is a dumb router. It operates at huge scale. It's great, but it doesn't understand anything beyond TCP. So request comes in. It only knows how to find a healthy IP within your VNet to route traffic to. It doesn't know what kind of request came in. So you need to make sure that whatever is coming into a given port will be able to be served by whatever responded healthy to that health probe.
Okay, so you would probably say, even if all the other services are using dynamic ports, just have one of them that's just a static port. So I can just say, hit that thing. It's gonna, find out all the different nodes, but it'll have that IP, so it can find that, do the health against that, and then route accordingly from there. Precisely,
and make sure that your dynamic port range does not include whatever port you use for static assignment. Generally, you would just go with the default 80 and 443. Mm-hmm. And yeah, just make sure nobody else claims those ports, and life will be good.
Great, thank you.
Just FYI, because this is a common concern, you need to pay special attention to the teardown and startup sequencing of these components. You want to make sure that as you are shutting down, you might still be receiving new traffic from load balancer until load balancer realizes you're actually offline. So you need to manage those things. I think at some point we're going to be able to share some more details of how we achieve a zero downtime path there. It's not hard. It just means you need to think about it for a little.
For the session affinity support, if I've got this thing running on several different machines, is this able to talk across the cluster and across the services to handle affinity to the same place, even if the different requests are coming into different endpoints?
So for the time being, and that could change, but for the time being, we follow a fully stateless philosophy, much like what Envoy did, which simplifies things a lot in a lot of layers. So this is what we're going with for the time being. Having said that, nothing would prevent you from building a stateful, strongly consistent layer on top that applies the settings to YARP when you want them to change. But at its current state, it's fully stateless. The way you might achieve something like what you're suggesting is through consistent hashing, and there are some load balancing solutions very, very common in the industry that would, for example, take a header or take a cookie or take something from the incoming request, compute a hash, and using that hash, figure out which destination to go to. It becomes fairly random, but at the same time still deterministic.
Sure. Okay. Great. Thank you.
I see another question. I don't know if it's been answered. Does YARP currently support layer 7 routes for multiple services via config?
Yep, very much so. So
only layer 7.
That's probably the primary reason you might want to use something like that, is that you get those benefits. and not just based on path, but based on anything, because you can add custom codes to it if necessary.
Is that configured through the Service Fabric integration though?
Yeah, I don't know if you were able to see that. I went through that a bit fast, but let me share my screen real quick here and show you a concrete example. That should be coming up shortly. Okay, hopefully you are able to see that. So if I go to my weather demo here, and in my service manifest, I have that extension that I mentioned, right? So this is my YARP extension. And it supports a lot of labels. This is using a few of them. So I'm saying I want to be hosted on this host name. Maybe I also want to be on example.com. So I could do that. And I can choose what path I want to be running on. So I could say this will be under /service1/everything. Or maybe I want just one endpoint. So I could say /service/a. Now only requests that match localhost or example.com /service/a, only those would match this service.
Understood. Gotcha.
Cool.
Thanks.
Looks like we did cover. There are a couple of questions which we answered offline. One was regarding the backup restore service. Can that be added to an existing cluster without any data loss or interruption? Like I think Peter did answer. We've shared links, I think how you can add it to an existing cluster, and how you can also, when you set up a new cluster, how you can enable that without any interruption. And there was, I think Wit had multiple questions on the open source repo and maintaining it and trace pipeline. I did answer it. So I know, as I said, be patient with us. Like we are investing time starting this semester to be active on the GitHub, but there is some internal work that we have to do to get us ready to be really in the open. Our long-term goal is to maintain all the GitHub open repo, service fabric repo to be in par with the latest and greatest releases, and also eventually build in the open and provide you guys more information. But we want to make sure, like, we build a strong foundation before we start doing it in the open. So thanks for your patience on that front. I'm trying to make sure that if I missed any, most of them are YARP question, I believe, addressed it. So Mike and Peter, if you missed anything, please shout out. And there's I think Jeffrey, like I've given you my email ID. I know this question comes up very often, like what to use Kubernetes versus Service Fabric. I think there's no one fit answer because each of the services platform, Service Fabric offers its own key differentiators, features, and it depends on your workload, depends on your requirement, what you want to do. And you really need some of the differentiators the Service Fabric offers, like the stateful services, the programming models. So we need to have those questions answered. So I've given you my alias. Feel free to send me an email. We're happy to sit with you and understand your requirements and guide you appropriately, irrespective of whether it's Service Fabric or Kubernetes.
Anthony, there's one there about the mixed OS. We get a lot mixed OS cluster support. Aside from Wit. Waldo, are you still there, Wit? I think you are. Yeah, you are.
I'm sorry. Yes.
Yes. Do you still looking for an answer for that? So currently, it's still not supported. You're asking specifically, is it on the roadmap?
Supported. I'm trying to recollect. Like either this question comes up very often. I'm trying to see if I can
ask it every month.
Yeah. We got
every month. You're making some progress, so I'll just keep asking.
So
I'm trying to make sure like I don't say anything different. Like I believe Matt had a better answer. Matt has given this answer, so I cannot recollect it. But yeah, we don't have support for it right now. But if when it's on the roadmap, I'm definitely, it's as I said earlier, like GitHub is going to be in a better shape in the long term. So we really want to share whatever we are doing internally. Whatever's on a roadmap, like product roadmap, 12 to 16 months or 6 to 12 months, we will be sharing it with you. So right now we don't have, I don't have an answer. So next time I'll have a better answer.
Great. Next month it
for
is.
framing. Hey, Whit, for framing, is this for running on Azure or on-prem or both?
On Azure.
On Azure, okay.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
there's
because ideally, I guess it kind of comes from I'm paying for these VMs already. So
yeah.
I'm paying for this amount of capacity. So I hate to then go and spin up container instances just to have Linux support for stuff.
Is this
every
for
now and then I'll need something that I guess in this case I want to run the Elk stack, but it only runs on Linux. So it just didn't make any sense to just pay again for container instances when I'm already paying for all these VMs that have capacity.
Totally understood. Are you?
I'm running Elk on Windows.
Well, we ultimately moved on. It didn't meet our needs, but it's still there's so many Linux tools out there that it'd be great to just be able to spin up. Hey, here's 3 more machines that I can just distribute whatever I need on those, and benefit from stuff like YARP to handle that routing.
Cool.
Okay.
We should have a better answer for you in a month. Yeah, we're exploring. I'll just say broadly, we're exploring things from leveraging ACI to reducing cogs for the control plane and making it easier to spin more clusters and everything. So,
right. I mean, I guess in a similar thing, I was typing up a question for it, but hadn't finished it out. Is that you've got all sorts of lift and shift scenarios that are described, especially on Kubernetes. It's like here's one of them. How do you run a Spark job directly off AKS? And it'd be fantastic to be able to see similar things that are supported on the Service Fabric side to say, it works great on that platform, but you can also do that in Service Fabric too because they're just containers.
Yeah.
That's a great point.
Yeah. Thanks for. I know we are like 1 minute past. Thank you all for the great questions. If Cesar has posted a feedback, please fill in the feedback. And just to wrap up, if questions are not being answered, feel free to shoot us an email, or we'll catch up in the next community call, or put it in Yammer. Thank you again, David. Thanks for your time. It looks like there's a lot of interest. Hopefully, where the community will help shape this into a more solid, mature open source and get to the production ready state soon. And I think, Cesar, I'm going to, if you don't mind, can you also, I think you already posted, if you can take the time after this call, I'm asking the people who attend this to fill in that survey and share your thoughts on the ideas that you want to hear from us. So as of today, I think the next month, there was in the last survey, people has asked about Backup Explorer, I believe. Yeah. Which is another open source, which is in preview state. So we plan to talk about it and demo it in next month's Q&A, because we are trying to fix some core issues and bugs, and we wanted to be in a better shape for the presentation and demo with you guys. Thank you, guys. Thank you, and thanks for staying about 3 minutes extra.
Yep. So one more time to wrap up. Thank you, Service Fabric team. Thank you, everyone, for attending. I'm sure on behalf of the team, this feedback is so valuable to hear from you guys. So thank you for joining. We look forward to seeing you again in the next one. Please fill out both of the surveys that you see there. One is a 30-second survey. How do we do during this webcast? The other one is for ideas for the next Service Fabric webcast. And as always, keep the feedback coming into ACP. This is what it's all about. So I'll let you guys sign off from the team.
Yeah,
Thanks
you,
a lot, folks, and thank you for the invite to speak to you today. Appreciate it.
Thanks, David.
Thanks,
Great
David.
day, folks. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thanks. Bye.